Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we will talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. With me, as always, my co-host, Jamie Franks, X739D. Folks, those are call signs. That is what ZERT is all about. If you are not in the know, you should be in the know. And if you are, then we would love to hear your call sign and what made you first get into ZERT. So that's your homework for today's episode. If you are listening to this and you are an active ZERT member, sign off down below in the comments. If you are on YouTube or if you are on the just the podcast channels with your call sign and what you love about ZERT.
And if you are in the know and you do have a call sign, you should be striving to add that little delta at the end.
Very true.
Because in order to get there, that means you're probably going to have to go out and train, which you guys should know that I'm a big proponent of training across the board for everything. But
you and me both.
If that's your motivation to get out and do a little physical training and some shooting training, try to get that delta.
Yeah, it is. That's such a cool experience. And I think that there is probably some room for not improvement on that. I think the shooting standards, the NSS, the IW, and the Triple S, I think lock that down pretty good. But I think that there could be a couple other earned patches out there. I know that the communications side of things, there are some earned patches as far as, getting your ham license, and then you get the comms tab, and then, or the comms patch, and then the technician operator, and there's one other tab as well for the comms side of things. But I think that can expand into additional earned patches. You did bring up something about fitness. I would love to offer some kind of medical earned patch. Medical is tough because for a while there was a ZERT medic patch, and all of the members want me to bring it back. And I have not done that because I believe there is probably some legality. I don't want to say legality issues, but there's some liability issues, right? I mean, if you're rolling around with a medic patch.
Yeah, I agree. And the only we didn't talk about this beforehand, so this is just completely off the top of my head. I would say if we were going to do that, it would need to be tied directly to some sort of like actual certification or licensing in the civilian world. Right. Yeah. I'm a National Registry EMT. And so like as an EMT to maintain that currency, you have to do what we call CEUs every year, continuing education units. And so, I mean, I guess that just a cookie cutter way to be a ZERT medic would be if you get your EMT qualification, and then you have to provide proof that you're doing your CEUs every year or something. I don't know. But I would be a little hesitant to just hand out medic patches to people, but I am all about the earned patch. I am like, I've recommended one to you just because it's one of my little passions in life is diving. I gave the idea for ZERT to have a ZURT, which is the ZERT Underwater Reconnaissance Team. And, for a person to earn the ZERT Underwater Reconnaissance Team patch, you have to be, you have to get you have to be an advanced open water diver, and you have to do you have to be able to show that you did 10 dives below 100 feet or something like that,
I think that's cool.
But I recently, actually it's not recent. I think they just revived it. I think it actually came out maybe 6 or 8 years ago, but it's a RE Factor Tactical. They have a challenge that's out there, and they have the kill card challenge.
Yes, and that's pretty fun.
It's I love seeking out these challenges and these and if you have to demonstrate much like the ZERT Triple S drill to earn your Delta Troop patch. You have to show that the target is clean. You have to show that your timer is at 0. You have to show that the distance is measured out, and then you have to perform this shooting standard, with accuracy within a certain amount of time. It incorporates You have to transition between 3 targets. It incorporates 2 combat reloads. You have to do it in 7 seconds or less. It's at 5 yards, and it's really tight. I tried it just for shits and giggles. I tried it at the range last Saturday, and my best run was 7.01 with 1 miss.
Oh,
so
not bad.
so I need to get out and do a little bit of training, but I think that patch is within my reach. It's a really cool patch that's not for sale. The only way to get that patch, again, just like the Delta ZERT Delta troop patch, you have to earn it, you have to show it. And so far, all these different outlets that have offered all these different challenges, there's only one that I have not been able to do. I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried, and so far I cannot do it. It's the one that Terran Tactical put out a couple of years ago. It's the Terran Tactical Grandmaster Challenge. You have to have 2 steel BCC silhouette targets. They have to be at 7 yards, and they have to be center to center. They have to be 3 feet apart. You have to draw from the holster and shoot each target twice, and it has to be done in less than 1 second. And I have not been able to do that.
Wow.
There are a few people. The videos are out there. Like Vogel did it. Obviously, Terran did it. So there are some videos on YouTube of people successfully doing it. But that one is tough, and that one I've not been able to do it.
Is Terran doing it with a sight picture, or is he doing it from the hip? Because I mean,
Vogel and Terran both kind of did it the same, and they both did it with Glocks. And
Glocks,
they draw. Their first shot is from what I call from retention, where their gun has just cleared the holster, and they're basically hip shooting or point shooting for their first shot. Their second shot is about here. When they're transitioning over to the second target, they're not fully extended, and like Vogel, by the time he breaks the 4th shot, like the 4th shot has already left the muzzle and before he reaches full extension. So it is basically a point shooting drill, which, with my background, I'm pretty good at that. But like I would notice I could draw and get those first 2 hits in about 0.75. But by the time I transitioned onto the second target and got off 2 more shots, I was over 1 second every time. That's the only one of these challenges that I've not been able to do.
That's interesting. I like that.
I do like these earned patches.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. So, what firearm did you say they used?
They were both using Glocks.
What? I thought Glock is dead. Oh,
it's funny you mentioned that, because right after Christmas, I seem to vaguely remember seeing something about that on every single social media page on the planet.
Yeah, I think it was something. Was it was a new gun that came out, right? It was a Smith and Springfield Coke 9 killer, 19 killer, something. I don't know.
Well, it is SHOT Show time, so I'm sure in the next week my social media feed, in addition to Mr. Glock being dead, there's going to be probably a dozen things that are claiming to be the next Glock Killer that won't be. But.
Right. So, folks, if you haven't caught on to that little transition there, we're going to be talking about Glock today, and Mr. Glock himself has obviously just passed away, and he lived a pretty long and pretty good life at the helm of Glock, and
and that means that his wife is now single and she's hot and loaded.
There you go.
So maybe that's what I should
you can be the
Shot
future Show. Mr. Step Glock. But anyway, I've seen a couple of videos. Obviously, everybody was talking about it. Now everybody is talking about, what's the future of Glock look like, and we are not going to be any different. This topic and this show kind of was birthed was over a couple of things, and we'll talk about my journey to away and back to Glock. I'm sure we'll dive into yours as well, but and then kind of into what I carry, and I have them all, short of HK and Canix and all of that stuff. But yeah, CZs. I got your core 3, right? Your Smith and Wesson, your SIG, and your Glock. And it's funny because, you know, I'll have a conversation with Russo and I'll tell him about this and he'll be like, oh, what does there need to be another video about a Glock for? But I mean, it doesn't matter because there's always going to be a video about Glock. And, you know, one of the cool things about ZERT and the members and the community of ZERT is everyone can take something from this or nothing from this, but everybody will probably talk about it at the next meet and greet, whether they're talking to another ZERT member. But I mean, at the end of the day, it provides some common ground conversation to have. You know, I think there's a reason why Glock is probably the #1 selling handgun of all time. And I'm that's a blanket statement. I don't know if that's true. If there's a fact check out there, do it. But I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, I think so too, especially when you consider how many militaries worldwide and how many law enforcement units worldwide are using a Glock variant. I mean, the guns came out. So a quick and dirty history lesson. The first gun that came out was the Glock 17. It was called the Glock 17 because it held, you know, the magazine standard capacity was 17 rounds. The first generation came out in 1982, which means that Glocks have been around now for 42 years. Is that right? Yeah. So they came out and now, you know, that was the Gen 1 Glock 17. We're now on generation 5 of Glocks. There are 33 different models of Glocks available in 8 different calibers. And when I say 33 models, that doesn't account for all the generation differences. And what I mean by that is if you just counted the Glock 17, there would be a Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5. That doesn't, I just counted the Glock 17 as 1, not 5 in my 33. So not accounting for the generational differences, there are 33 different models available in 8 different calibers. And Glock's little tagline, if you get a Glock hat or a Glock patch or a Glock shirt or anything, like Glock's little tagline is perfection. That's it. It's Glock perfection. And when I was thinking about it, and when I was thinking about this show, over these generations, Gen 1 to Gen 5, they've made the guns available in different calibers, in different frame sizes, double stack, single stack, barrel length. You know, they've made all these differences. But for the most part, I think all of these differences could almost fall under the header of cosmetic differences. They changed the grip angle. They added stippling. They made the grip where you could have finger grooves or not finger grooves, or they, you know, so it's all, and, you know, in Gen 5, they finally, like, one of my biggest gripes about Glocks was always the factory sights sucked. So like finally for Generation 5, they finally updated the sights and things like that. But that's still a cosmetic difference, really. And the operating action of the Glock has not changed really in 40 years.
Right. The action hasn't. Didn't they do something? Well, we're going to say allegedly, but didn't they allegedly do something with the barrel in Generation 5? Did they say there's some kind of marksman barrel that is now in the Gen 5?
I do think they did say the Gen 5 barrels, like just out of the box, every Gen 5 Glock has what they're calling a match grade barrel, I think is basically what it is. And then whatever the barrels were before, like if they were blued or they weren't, what's the word I'm looking for? The finish that the military puts on their barrels. They were, damn it. But anyway, I think like all the new Glock barrels are like black nitride or QPQ or whatever it is. But I do think they did say all the Gen 5, but still, that's still not a change in the way the gun operates. And so I think Gaston Glock, I think he's maybe the most perfect literal example of a guy who stuck to his guns. I mean, every year on social media, you see, like on April Fool's Day, you always see somebody posts like a little Photoshop picture of a Glock 1911 or a Glock AR-15. And like, really, I'm glad they've never done that because the Glocks have endured because they are perfect the way they are. I mean, I would
So I remember somebody describing the Glock as the revolver of semi-automatics.
I think that's a very perfect discussion, because one of the things I've always said that is one of the strong suits of a revolver is that you could buy a revolver, load it, stick it in your sock drawer, leave it there for 15 years. And when the day comes that you finally need to reach into that sock drawer and pull that revolver out, it's going to work. And
Right.
I think that's kind of a safe bet that a Glock would fit that description also. I think you could load a Glock, chamber around, stick it in your sock drawer, and leave it there for 10 years and pull it out, and it's going to work. I would, if I had $1 million to bet, and we could take, if there was some way that you could basically make a semi-automatic handgun like be belt fed, meaning like you don't have to change magazines, that you could just set it up where there was just a continuous feed of ammunition. If we could set up a bench with like a Smith & Wesson, a Glock, a Beretta, a Sig, a Canic, a Staccato, on and on and on, and we could make some robot that would fire every gun every second, bang, bang, bang,
right.
bang, with a never-ending source of ammunition, I would bet my $1 million that the Glock will be the last one standing. Like, however many thousands of rounds that would take, I would, and this is purely my opinion, but I would bet my money on the Glock.
Yeah. Now there are some awesome videos out on YouTube. Eric from IV 8888, Iraq veteran 8888. He did a video. I don't remember what it was, but it was basically they took a Glock 19 and torture tested it. I mean, I believe it was full auto. I believe they had the full auto sear in it, and I don't know if it was, I don't even remember exactly how many rounds. So if somebody out there has seen this video, definitely chime in. But it was something like thousands and thousands of rounds, tens of thousands of rounds, until the Glock failed. And I believe, and I mean, he's wearing welder gloves at the end of it, because it was just so hot. I believe the first thing that failed was the spring and the guide rod. I believe they melted it. So they had to swap that out. And then there again, it ended up failing after so many rounds, but this was literally kind of like the experiment that you just said right there, because obviously at the end of it, heat is going to eventually take its toll on the firearm. But let's take a step back. Let's take a trip in the old ZERT DeLorean here and go back in time. I know. So
how can I earn that patch?
Right. So your first experience with Glock was
let's see. My girlfriend makes fun of me because I have like 1 million friends named Chris. So one of my other friends named Chris, that's not you. He had this was when I was a water survival instructor. So this was 2005, 2006. Okay. And my friend Chris had a Glock 23C. Okay. And which doesn't exist anymore. So actually, I don't know if that counts towards my 33 models or not. I think I've counted 33 current models. Anyway, the 23C doesn't exist anymore. But my other friend Chris had one. And I think shooting his 23C was my first exposure to actually holding a Glock in my hand and shooting it. So I've been a gun guy my whole life. I've been a shooter since my dad started teaching me how to shoot when I was about 6. Most everybody knows that I joined the military when I was 17 and went on and was on the TV show Top Shot, and which I'm pretty sure on my season of Top Shot we didn't shoot any Glocks on season 2. I think that's correct.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I mean, I watched all seasons. I don't really remember the Glock making that many appearances. But
I think in the later seasons, once Terran got involved, I think the Glocks showed up in the later seasons. But I have to think really hard. I don't think in season 2, and I don't think in the All-Star season, I don't think we used Glocks. But anyway, so I honestly, like, up to the point where I was on Top Shot, I really had next to no experience with Glocks.
Right.
I most of my exposure with handguns had been with military handguns, so SIG P226, SIG P228, Beretta, M9, 1911s, things like that, and then
Sure.
growing up, shooting revolvers and stuff. So it really wasn't until I met Taryn after season 2 of Top Shot, and kind of struck up a friendship with him. And then after I was on season 2 of Top Shot, that's when I got kind of recruited to be a sponsored pro shooter, because my portrayal, the way I conducted myself on the show, I conducted myself as a person with honesty and integrity.
Sure.
And so I was offered sponsorship deals after I was on Top Shot. And so in 2011, that was the first time when I first started competing. The first branch of the competition shooting tree that I jumped straight into the deep end, was 3-gun. And when I first started, I was shooting 3-gun with my P226. Wow. So in 2011, okay. In 2011 was the first time I competed in the multi-gun nationals. And that was when the big light bulb came on above my head, because that was when I really saw, like, I wasn't being beaten by better shooters. I was being beaten by shooters that had better equipment than I had. And that really, like, if anybody knows anything about me, that really lit a fire under my butt, because it pissed me off that I was, like, losing to shooters that I don't think were as good as me, but they were beating me because they had better equipment. And so I was shooting my pistol was a SIG P226, and I could shoot it well, but a SIG P226 is not physically capable of cycling as fast as a Glock. So I talked to Taryn and asked him what gun I should get. And my very first Glock that I ever purchased was a Glock 17L, and this one has been tuned up by Taryn. And so this was my main competition pistol. This was the first Glock I ever owned. Glock 17L, tuned up by TTI. It still is, like, every part in this gun is still factory. But like, Taryn did a trigger job, and he did stippling and did cuts in the slide and all that kind of stuff. But the gun itself is still all factory parts. I think with the exception of the guide rod, like you said, with the guide rod melting, this one does have a tungsten guide rod. But other than that, I believe every part in this gun is still a factory Glock part. It's just tuned up by Taryn. But this was my first Glock that I bought. That was in 2011. And it's, because guys were running past targets at the multi-gun nationals and shooting with, like, 0.15 splits. And my SIG P226 is fit. No matter how good I am, that SIG P226 is not capable of running 0.15 splits.
Right.
So
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so that started my journey on into Glocks, and that's also kind of when I started to view, like, a Glock as a tool. It's like when you open your toolbox, you pick out the right tool for the job, for whatever job you're doing, and so that I needed a better tool for the job I was doing, and so that's now let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 Glocks sitting here in front of me.
There you go. So my first experience with Glock was a friend of mine. I remember he had the Glock 23. And 40 caliber, chambered in 40. And it is the 40 version of the 19. There you go. For those that are just listening, obviously there is a little bit of a show and tell happening today, so you will miss out on that. But I
was holding up my Glock 23. Yep. I
remember, when it was right around the time when I was like, okay, like, let's see, I'm going to get my first pistol that I'm going to carry. And at the time, I was in school, and I was going to school for, criminal justice, blah, blah, blah. I was actually doing an internship with the U.S. Marshals at the time. And I remember talking to a couple of the deputy marshals about a firearm. And the one guy I talked to was like, listen, if you're going to do it once, do it right, get a SIG. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
And
I don't disagree with him very completely yet.
Right. And SIG is going, and we'll touch on SIG a little bit. I mean, SIG used to be, well, I don't know if it still is or not. I mean, but it was a German company, right? There's the famous, the German SIGs were the reliable ones, and then the ones that they were.
My P226, I bought it in the year 2001.
Yeah.
And mine still says what does it say? I think it says frame made in West Germany is what it says. I think the slide was maybe made in New Hampshire.
Okay.
But because I think mine, if I look at it, I think it says frame made in West Germany.
So anyway, I went, and that's what I ended up getting. I got the SIG it's now called the SP 2022, but back then it was the SP 2340, or I believe that's what it was. But basically it was, it was a single action, double action with a decocker, and you could swap out for 357 SIG if you wanted to run that. And that's what I carried. And it was a monster of a handgun. I did not start my Glock journey until some years later, 2000 and I don't know. It was in late 2000s, before 2010. I ended up going back to what he had at the time, and I ended up getting a Glock 23, and that was what I was carrying. Obviously chambered in 40 caliber. And I had that until I got rid of it. And I was just like, not really what I want. And I actually that's when I decided to move out of 40, and I went into 45, and I was carrying a 1911. So that's kind of, where I started with my Glock journey. And if I had to go back, you said originally the first Glock came out in 82. So I'd be curious to know, that would be considered Gen 1, right? How long did Gen 1 take place? Because if I remember correctly, Gen 1 and Gen 2 are both pre-94. And what I mean by that is they're considered pre-ban here in the state of Connecticut, where you could actually have a threaded barrel in that. So I would be curious to know what those generation gaps look like. Like how long was Gen 1 in place? How long, when did they switch over to Gen 2? I mean, it seems like now it's every couple of years. But if we've only got 5 generations and they've been around for 42 years, I don't math very well on a Friday afternoon.
So I'm quickly scrolling through this, and this is telling me that second generation came out in 1991.
Okay.
Third generation came out in 1998.
Okay. That makes sense.
Just interesting little tidbit. Because of the way the approved handgun roster and all that stuff works in the great state of California, as of now in January of 2024, as we record this, the good people of California, we are still only allowed to have Generation 3 Glocks. So fourth generation came out in 2010, and fifth generation came out in 2017.
Okay, so there's no real kind of regimented release of what their generations are. So it is what it is. So my journey back to Glock it's a really weird story, but it started last year at SHOT Show with you, when we went to the Glock booth and I picked up the Gen 5 19, and something felt different. I'm not going to say that I didn't have a Glock before that. I mean, I ended up picking up a Gen 3 40. I got it super cheap.
Like a
23.
Okay, sorry. So now I think there actually is a Glock 40
Oh yeah, right.
And
We'll go
so
down the whole. I mean, whoever is naming these Glocks, please let's figure something out here because the confusion level is out of control. Because a Glock 45 is not a G45 is not chambered in 45. So
no, and
there
a
you go.
Glock 44 is not chambered in 44 Magnum, and a Glock 22 is not chambered in 22 LR. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Which is just insane. But anyway, I I ended up picking up a Gen 3 40 cal um from just super cheap and I couldn't pass it up. I ended up converting it to a 9 millimeter, so it's ipso
So
facto a 19. But
yeah, and so let me jump in real quick there. Like when people ask me what should they buy for their first handgun, number one, I don't think there's a good answer to that.
No.
When people ask me what gun they should buy, my first piece of advice is to try to go to a shooting range that has
Yeah,
lots of guns to rent.
exactly.
Pick 4 or 5 that you think you like and shoot them, and get whatever gun you shoot well with. But people that do pin me down and ask me for a specific gun to buy, if they don't want to take that first piece of advice, I tell them the Glock 23 I think is probably the best, because the Glock 23, I held mine up a second ago. It's the Glock 19 frame. It's chambered in 40 caliber. And if you buy the larger caliber gun, meaning you buy the 40 caliber gun, you can convert it down to 9mm just with a conversion barrel and the extractor. That's you have to switch out the barrel and the extractor, and then you basically have 2 guns in one for the price of a barrel. So I like the Glock 23 and the 22. The 22 can be converted down to a 17. The 23 can be converted down to a 19, and you basically get 2 guns in one. You cannot convert the 9mm up to 40. You can only convert the 40 down. So, but that I love the 23 for that reason, and that's one of my most recommended guns for that reason.
Yeah, I go a little bit different when that recommendation thing happens, but that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. But so from there, I sent it over to my buddy Aaron at Alpha Dog Arms here, because I knew that, and at the time I was fully vested into Smith & Wesson. I kind of went the Smith & Wesson M&P route, based on, at the time Kyle was still involved with, Kyle Lamb was still involved with M&P. I got to shoot some of it, and it was just a great gun.
It is a great gun.
It is.
And that's another thing I tell people, that I honestly cannot think of one single bad thing to say about a Smith & Wesson M&P. I just don't prefer them. It's a preference thing, but they are great guns. Yeah.
Right. So, so from there, I sent it over to him and I was like, yeah, listen, let's use it. At the time he was doing all of the slide cuts with the CNC machine. He was doing the grip, the laser grip stippling. And so he basically, I don't have the slide on it anymore, or the grip on it anymore, but this is the slide from that firearm, and you can see it's got the cuts there, and he cut it for an optic, and that was that, right? And that's got the aftermarket conversion barrel. But I shot it. I went and took it to the range. I shot it, and that was it. And then I never carried it again. My next Glock was actually it was gifted to me during the time when Full Conceal was around, and they were making the folding Glocks. I think I've showed you the picture of it.
I think that was around the time that I first met you, and you actually had it on you, and I got to hold it and finger it.
Oh yeah, could have been. But yeah, it was at an NRA show. I actually did some consulting for him at the time, and then I was given one of those, and I still have it. It was a Gen 3, so I actually took that slide off and put it on another Gen 3 that I kind of had, because I wasn't going to carry that thing. And so so that was that. Then I ended up picking up a 48 and I carried that for a while because I liked the single stack side of things. And, you know, 10 round mag at the time, you can get a shield arms and you could bump it up to a 15 and you basically have a 19 in a slimmer package. But then the first of the 19 killer, the Glock Killer, made its way into the arena, the social media arena. And if I remember correctly, it was this, and I am holding up the SIG P320. This is the X frame series. So this has the different frame, but the initial one came out. And I believe the reason it started to get that kind of nickname is because it actually killed Glock's hopes with the contract for the military. Because right,
they put up the 19X.
They put up the 19X versus the P320. The military wanted a pistol that was modular, and you know, you could take out the fire control of the P320 and turn it into a subcompact, turn it into a full size, turn it into a carry, yada yada yada. Glock offered the 19 with a lanyard hole.
Yeah, and I think just to be as objectively honest as possible,
sure.
I think because I mean there's many SOCOM units that use Glock 17s and 19s because SOCOM basically has a blank check to buy whatever they want. They're not tethered to the whatever standard issue is for the rest of the Department of Defense. But one of the big things that killed Glock, and again this goes back to what I said at the top about Gaston Glock sticking to his guns all these years. The Department of Defense wanted a gun with a safety that you could turn safety off, safety on, safety on, safety off. And Glock said, no, we're not going to do that. And so I think if you could put your finger on one single element that killed the Glock 19X, that kind of knocked them out of the running. It had nothing to do with how good or bad the gun was or how modular it was or wasn't. The Department of Defense wants a safety selector switch that goes on and goes off, and Glock said, nah.
Right. I mean, and just think about that for a second. To basically be like, nah, we don't need it. We don't need your business, U.S. military. That's kind of, I mean, that tells you right there how big they are. Just a little bit of industry information on Glock. Most companies strive to have the Glock model of business. And Glock's model of business is very simple. They really only sell direct to very, very few customers. They sell direct to distributors, and then dealers have to buy through them.
Right.
If you are, I'm sure if you are a large enough national chain, you can buy, like, I'm sure Bass Pro, you know, Cabela's, maybe Sportsman's Warehouse, they probably have a deal with Glock. But other than that, like, yeah, nope, they do not sell. Like, if you go to your local gun store, they're not buying direct from Glock. So everybody wants that model because it streamlines things very, very easily. So basically that's it. Now, where I've come full circle is, you know, I carried the M&P, and truth be told, I love shooting my M&P, just like you said. I really do. There's reasons why I moved kind of away from it. I think that there's some things, you know, where the company is kind of a little bit dated. And then I did move over to the P320 platform because it was just, everybody was talking about it. And I've never really loved it. I went to SHOT Show. I put hands on that 19. I ended up picking one up, going to the range with it a few times. And I've decided that's where I'm back. I'm back in my comfort zone. And, you know, I've got a Gen 5 19 that I've taken a few classes with this year, and there are no issues. The only issue was the front sight came flying off in one of the things, but that was me. You know, Loctite is your friend, folks. So It's funny that, I mean, I've come kind of full circle. Well, not really full circle, because it wasn't my first firearm, but it was the first firearm that I really started to carry every day. And now here I am again. You cannot beat its reliability.
Yeah. So one of my friends, I won't say his name because I don't know. I don't know if he would want me to, but one of my friends was a Dev Group SEAL for many years. He was a sniper at Dev Group, and now he's out, but he still does things for government agencies. That's why I don't know if he would want me to say his name, but he travels around and he does. I think he has the FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Certificate. So he's qualified to train federal law enforcement and law enforcement agencies. So he travels around. And so a few years ago, he was here in San Diego, and he was doing a course with the San Diego County SWAT team, San Diego County Sheriff's Department SWAT team. And he reached out to me, and he wanted me to be just a RSO and a line coach. He was like, I do not want you to be an instructor. So don't throw in when I'm teaching, don't throw in your 2 cents. I just need you to be a line coach and an RSO. I said, yeah, that's fine. But all these super high speed tactical SWAT officers, they all showed up, and I believe every single one of them had super tacticaled out, super custom, and probably super expensive 1911s. And over the duration of that course, it was a 3-day course, and to the best of my memory, and I'm not exaggerating, I don't think we ever got through one single course of fire without somebody's gun going down. Somebody's gun went down every single course of fire. And you can be a Glock hater all you want to, but me as a firearms instructor, that does not happen with Glocks, except when people have gone way too crazy with all their aftermarket modifications. Like I did have a couple of people show up to my class just in this past year in 2023, and they had gone way too overboard with aftermarket Glock parts and really customing out their Glock. I don't know if that's a word. Customizing their Glocks. But they had gone way too far, and they had crossed over the fulcrum point where to make their Glock look cooler, they had actually dug into sacrificing the reliability of the Glock. So, but if you keep the Glock stock, I'm going to reach over here and grab one of the other ones. This is a Glock 22 blue label that I bought. This was a total impulse buy. I was back home in North Carolina, and because of my dad, there's a store there in Raleigh, North Carolina that to go in there and buy stuff, you have to be a law enforcement officer. And so this was a police turn-in blue label Glock. I'm sure some police officer carried this Glock 22 40 cal in his holster for many, many, many years. And this Glock is bone stock, and it's a very early Gen 3. When I first bought it, I almost thought it was a Gen 2, but it's actually a really early Gen 3. And this gun shoots like freaking butter, man. And it is 100% bone stock blue label Glock law enforcement turn in, and this gun shoots like freaking butter. So if you leave these guns alone, they run great. And then I also have here in front of me my Lantac Glocks, which
now when you say Lantac Glock, let's kind of break that down for a second. Is it an actual Glock and it's got some work done to it, or is it so I have the one that I showed you here. This is a polymer 80 frame,
right,
with a Glock slide barrel and whatnot.
So I have the Lantac Razorback Glock 17 and 19.
Okay.
From the slide down, everything is factory Glock except the trigger. Lantac does have their own trigger. Everything from the slide up is completely, the sights are Trijicon sights, but everything else is manufactured by Lantac. So the barrel, the guide rod, the spring, the slide, the safety plunger, the striker, everything on the top end is manufactured by Glock. The frame is an actual Glock frame, but with the Lantac trigger.
So the frame is a Glock frame, but the
yes.
slide is not a Glock slide.
Correct. Yeah, it's manufactured in Fort Worth, Texas, by my friends at Lantac. Yeah, and the barrel
nice,
as well.
Very nice. Okay.
But yeah. So, and you know, I don't know if we were gonna get into this, but I mean, like I would say the leading names, in kind of the aftermarket Glock stuff. You know, obviously I'm a Lantac fan. Agency, Grey Ghost Precision, Terran Tactical. This is another point that I wanted to make, though. Like, some people would look at the Terran Tactical guns almost as like a separate gun, like almost like it's not a Glock anymore. But then that goes back to the Glock perfection thing. Like, it is. It's when you look past the cosmetics of it at its heart, and like my Lantac ones too, you know, at the heart of these guns, they are still Glock design. I mean, they're just they're aftermarket, you know, upgrade parts, if you will. But they're just to get through my list: Lantac, Agency, Grey Ghost, TTI, and Zev. But it, like, all those kind of upper tier, higher end Glocks, and now even Noveske has a Glock now. But it still is a Glock at heart. So,
well, it's funny because you look at, you know, we're sitting here, and the subject of this is Glock dead, and we refer to that because in order to be dead, there's always something that has to kill it, right? And so we've talked about the P320 as the Glock killer. You know, the Shadow Systems, they have a gun out there that is, that was the 19 killer. And it's funny because a Glock is about a $550, $600 gun, right? And then you go and you look at one of these Shadow Systems, these agencies, and this TTI one, and you're over $1,000 by the time it's all said and done.
You're well over $1,000.
Exactly. Well over that. I mean, even for agency. And listen, I mean, the guys over at agency, Michael, he's a friend. I love their firearms. I love what they do. Shadow Systems, I think their firearm comes in around $1,200 to $1,500 for their 9. You know, the P80, like, so this P80 that I showed was actually a full firearm. So Polymer 80 was selling some full firearms as well. But you know, then you go and you cut up the slide and you put a trigger in it and you and you change out the sights, and you know, you're taking a $600 gun that is dubbed perfection and then doing a lot of other things to it. Am I guilty of some of that? Well, yeah, sure, right? Because we can't leave anything alone. I do have a basic one, which I call the analog one. And the only thing I've done to it is change the sights. And I put a Timony trigger in it. I put a Timony trigger in both of my 19s and the 19X. And I've done something with the grip. So I laser stippled the grip, but that's purely for, you know, for these 19s. I don't know what they did, but they really chinched on the grip as far as having something good there to hold on to. My everyday right now is this 48, and as you can see, I mean, it's got the grip tape on it. This is Talon grips, and it's the rubberized one. I got soft, delicate hands, man. I lotion, I'm moisturized. I don't like the hard stuff, but
yes, you do.
Yeah, boom. But I think you said it right. Lights and sights is what you recommend on the Glock. And that's for identification of your target. And some of those don't need more than that.
So if you just buy a Glock straight out of the box, you hit on another point there just a second ago, and I don't even think you knew that you did.
I know.
So again, like, I live in California. People in California, we are restricted to buying Generation 3 Glocks. The sights on Generation 4, 3, 2, and 1, the factory sights on Glocks were just plastic trash. I mean, I guess they did. Even the one I just held up, this police turn-in Glock 22. One of the things that caused me to impulse purchase this one, I don't know if I can show it on the camera there. It actually has Glock factory night sights on it.
Huh, okay.
Like these are not aftermarket sights; these are actual Glock sights. But most Glocks out of the box, the sights are not good.
No.
They're kind of plastic pieces of junk. So yeah, so that's the thing I recommend. When you go wherever you go to buy your new Glock out of the box, replace the sights, put a light on it, and get a good holster for it. That's the three things. You need to be able to retain that gun. You need to be able to positively identify your target, and you want good sights on there. Yeah. One of the things you hit on a second ago, talking about, these guns are, generally speaking, these guns are around $500 out the door when you go buy just a brand new bone stock, nothing special Glock 19, for example. This is a very early. This is before John Wick, pre-John Wick Terran Tactical Glock 34.
Right.
And so this one, honestly, is actually a very lightly modified Glock. This one is still pretty much a stock Glock. Again, the guide rod was upgraded to a tungsten guide rod. Terran did the trigger job. Occasionally when I still run into Terran, he loves this gun because he did the trigger job on this gun, but the trigger pull is unbelievable. And he himself can't even believe that he did this trigger job. It's unbelievable. He likes to stand around and do this with this gun because the trigger job he did on this is so phenomenal. But really, this is a very lightly modified, like you said, it has stippling, has a trigger job. I think he replaced a couple of the springs in it, and he put a tungsten guide rod on there. But other than that, this is just still. Oh, and it has his sights also. Sorry.
Okay.
But really, this is a very lightly modified gun. This is still 90% Glock parts in this gun. So this is a slightly juiced up $500 gun, and that's another arena where Glocks really stand out, because a Glock is a $500 gun. You had, like, last year at SHOT Show, you and I held that gun, that alien fire, whatever, it is, alien something gun, $7,000.
Yeah,
for a 9mm striker fired handgun. And so you can get how much does staccatos cost? Like $2,000, somewhere around.
Oh, I mean, staccatos are $2,000. I mean, yeah.
So
now you're talking, 2011.
You can get a $2,000 gun. You can get a $7,000 gun. You can get a $3,000 gun. But guys like Bob Vogel have won every single pistol championship that there is with this, with a $500 gun. So that one of the points that goes back to skill trumps gear, right? I mean, now it doesn't contradict what you said in the beginning, because in the beginning you said you were getting beat by guys because they had better gear than what you were, right? So they had a better platform. At the end of the day, put a P320 in Max Michel's hands and put a Glock in Bob Vogel's hands, and it doesn't matter what's in their hands, right? You're talking skill set. Blake, I mean, it didn't matter what some of those guys could shoot. I mean, it's just that's what it is. I don't know that I mean, shit, I beat Blake with a handgun on Top Shot All Stars.
Boom. If he's listening, boom. But then put a Smith & Wesson revolver in Jerry's hands, and does he come out on top? So it comes down to, obviously, repetition, skills, practice, training. You can take a $500 Glock and do a lot of things to it, but like Jamie said, it's not going to make you a better shooter.
This, as an instructor, one of my mantras that I repeat over and over and over and over, like I said, I was going to get Paul Taylor's quote tattooed on my arm, that whatever gun you have on you is your primary weapon. And on the other side, I'm going to get marksmanship doesn't come in a box. Like, if you, and people putting a red dot sight on their gun is the best, most recent example of this. If you can't shoot good without a red dot, putting a red dot on your gun is not going to magically make you shoot good. No, marksmanship doesn't come in a box. And so the point I was making was, going out and spending $7,000 on that ridiculous gun isn't going to make you able to beat Bob Vogel, like, because he'll beat you with a $500 gun that he just took out of the package yesterday. But another thing, because this is ZERT Coffee and Chaos, going back to how Glock is so prolific, and so what's the word? Just so ubiquitous. They have the juice to tell the U.S. military to fuck off because they're not going to put a safety switch on their gun. But so many law enforcement and law enforcement agencies nationwide and worldwide, and military units worldwide, and even some here in the United States, like I said, SOCOM units and stuff. Glocks are so just widely available and in such wide use across the spectrum with other civilians and those law enforcement agencies and military. If you were to buy a Glock 22 or 23, like I said, and you buy that conversion barrel and that extractor, and which, if you know what you're doing, literally takes less than 2 minutes to swap those things out. I have a video of that on my YouTube channel. In a prepper apocalypse situation, if you had that Glock 22 with a conversion barrel or Glock 23 with a conversion barrel, chances are extremely high that in an apocalypse type situation, you would be able to go out into the wild, so to speak, onto a city street and find an abandoned police car. And there might be magazines or ammunition in this abandoned police car. And there's a really, really high probability that it's going to be a Glock magazine in either 40 cal or 9mm ammunition.
Exactly. Now, just and it's funny you mentioned that, because the reason why I ended up going away from the SIG to that first Glock was that mindset right there. It is going to be universal in a time when you may need universal. With that being said, and kind of why I moved away from M&P goes back to your post, right? If you don't have 7 magazines for your firearm, then it's just a range toy. And that goes for rifle or pistol.
Yes.
Let's just talk reality here. A Glock magazine costs way less than an M&P magazine or a P320 magazine. Those are metal, and they're $40 for one mag, where you can get probably two Glock mags for the price of that. Also, there are so many companies that are making aftermarket magazines for Glocks.
Don't do it.
Magpul.
Don't do it.
What? No, listen, they're out there. People use them. Whether you think it's a good idea, whether you don't, people are out there doing it. People are
Jamie Franks says no. I have way more than 7 magazines for my Glocks, and every single one of them is a factory Glock magazine. I really do not recommend buying aftermarket mags, but okay.
And that's fine. I mean, are you kind of shying away from Magpul? Like, I mean, do you think the Magpul, again, they've been out for a minute.
Magpul P mags for the rifle are the gold standard.
Right.
The Magpul P mags for the Glock, no, thank you. Gotcha. I don't own a single one. Again, as an instructor, I get the benefit of seeing other people's poor decisions. I get to see all the shit that people bring to my class, and I have seen I'll tell you this, the only Glock magazines that I've ever had fail on me are ones that have actually physically broken.
Yeah.
Okay. But I have seen a fair number of the Magpul, the Glock P mags fail in classes when people bring them.
Right. Well, listen, they're out there. And whether you choose to test them and try them, I mean, do it. But there are more options available than the other platforms.
I lied. Hang on. I have to be intellectually honest. And one of my guns sitting here has it. I was given a whole bunch of these a few years ago. Yep. And actually, these have been pretty good. The only thing they're not great at, and let me see if I can do it here, is if I don't know if you can do that on here on YouTube, by the way. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Okay. Yeah. I was going to try to clear a double feed here for you, and that's the only thing. I haven't had one of these ETS mags break on me. Yeah. But when you clear a double feed, because they don't have the metal insert in the feed lips. It's all plastic. So it flexes where the factory Glock mags don't flex because it has the metal insert. But actually, sorry. So I do have some aftermarket ones of these, and these aren't bad. They do perform well. They just
and it's funny because
when you clear a double feed.
Because the 43X, the 48, the biggest complaint with those is they have a 10-round magazine and they're limited, right? In a time when you have the Shield Plus, the P365s, the macros, where they have these smaller platforms that are holding more ammo. So Shield Arms came out with these magazines that basically hold 15 rounds. And I think they ended up designing it from the original Glock mag, because like you just said, it's metal encased in plastic.
Yes.
And they basically said, okay, well, we can gain some more width by removing the plastic and just metal. So those magazines are metal. As we get to the end of this, I held up my everyday carry, and it is the 48. There's not much done to it except lights, sights. I do have a red dot. Now that's because my eyes are failing and it's just easier for me to see the dot than it is the sights. The only other thing that has been done to this is the spring kit from Terran Tactical. I've seen some videos out there of people taking the 43X and putting in a threaded barrel and then a compensator on the front. If anybody that's listening to the show and you're still listening is doing that, I would love to have you on the show and talk about why. What made you go with a 43X to extend the barrel to basically just have a 48? I mean, you paid more for the barrel, the threaded barrel, you paid more for the compensator, and you literally have the same exact gun that is stock. We will probably come back to a part 2 with this after SHOT Show, because I'll get out there and see the Glock 1911. I'll see the Glock revolver, and I'll see the Glock AR that they are probably releasing that everyone will meme about. But we'll come back to some of this, because I know that Paul Taylor will be joining us for some future episodes, and I know he's got a lot to say about this as well. But if you're running a 43X over the 48, I would love to know why. And there is the OG original 48. That is Jamie's.
No, this is the 43.
43.
I have all my Glocks laid out here, and the only one I don't think I showed was, this is my EDC. This is my daily carry Glock 43. It is bone stock. Of course, the Glock 43, you can't put a light on it, but I always do have a handheld light. We went into this pretty in depth on one of our other episodes, because you asked me, why did I choose to carry this? And so just really quickly, this is the smallest gun that I believe to still be effective. Like, there are some like micro pocket pistols that I don't think would actually be effective in a gunfight. I think this is the bare minimum of effectiveness in a gunfight. And to me, when you're concealed carrying, it's right there in the name. Concealment is the name of the game. So whether I'm wearing my little booty shorts, running shorts, or or anything up from that, I can make this gun disappear. So when you're concealed carrying, I think concealment should be a priority. When you're carrying a full-size Glock 19 with a light and a compensator and a red dot and 3 pistol bags and all this shit, like, is it really concealed? I mean, maybe if it's in the dead of winter in Connecticut and you're wearing a fucking starter jacket over it or something, but
starter jacket. I like it.
But in any state of dress, I can make this gun disappear, and I think that this gun is the minimum gun in terms of barrel length and magazine capacity and everything that would be effective in a gunfight. So so the Glock 43 is my go-to there.
There it is. Listen, at the end of the day, folks, it matters a little bit about what tool you use, but it matters mostly the training that you get with the tool. Is Glock dead? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I think they will continue to put out great products. I mean, my one possible question, and only time will tell, is how will Glock change now that Gaston is moved on? Boom.
That is an interesting question, and when you view it like, I think honestly a really apt comparison is the iPhone post Steve Jobs. You know, like right. So the iPhone. Honestly, like I was about to say, I don't even know where Steve Jobs came down politically, but from what I've read about him and from what I've seen, I read his book and all that stuff. He seemed to be a very ethically sound person. So I don't really have any access to grind with Steve Jobs. But the iPhone, I think, has skewed away from his vision and his direction a little bit after he passed away. So you kind of have to expect a little bit of the same thing from Glock, I would say. I mean, when Gaston was still alive, I bet you he was personally involved in the decision to not kowtow to the military and put a safety switch on it. And maybe if somebody else was at the helm, maybe they would have made that concession. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and it's more than just the iPhone, it's Apple in general. You know, I believe that original vision, original message has been diluted over time at Apple. And I'd be curious to see if that happens to Glock over time. I don't know. So here's the one caveat to that is I don't know if there is anybody involved in Apple that is family of Steve Jobs. I have no idea. But like you did say, I mean, there may be somebody still involved with Glock that their last name is Glock. So only time will tell. But like I said, folks, we will come back to this episode. We will definitely revisit this. I think it's important to get some of this information out to everybody, for those that are listening and our members that are curious, and those that are not members of ZERT, and just understanding that this is the kind of information that this community provides. And that's the most important part about this. So thank you as always for joining us again here on the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast. And just remember to stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you again soon. Jamie?
Yeah. One thing that everybody listening needs to understand is a large part of what I laid out here today is because I am just an extreme gun nerd in general. I love guns. I love the mechanics of guns. I love the fact that a gun is a machine and that I can use this machine to send this little tiny projectile to hit this little tiny target a half a mile away, and I can do it on purpose, and I can do it again and again and again because of this mechanical machine that's operating correctly. So I'm just a huge gun nerd in general. You, the listener, can nerd out as much as you want or as little as you want, but you can't go wrong with a Glock. And just remember, when you're going down your Glock journey, there is a point where modifying your gun does start to dig in to compromising the reliability of the gun. So I would caution you against that. And the best place you can spend your money is on ammunition and training. And like I said, unless Bob Vogel himself is listening, there's nobody out there that's going to beat Bob Vogel with a Glock or any other gun on planet Earth. Like, it's not going to happen. So, and Bob Vogel can beat you with a $400 gun, and Nils and guys like that. So, and Max Michel. So it's not the Indian, or it's not the Arrow, it's the Indian. So buy a good piece of equipment, which is Glock is a great piece of equipment. Glock is a great tool, and spend your money on ammunition and training. And remember that it's easy to be hard and it's hard to be smart.
All right, guys. Till next time, ZP002 out.